The grand ocular of the High Synod reflected the burning nebulas of the core systems, a swirling tapestry of violet and gold that served as the backdrop for the most powerful empire in the known galaxy. In the center of the obsidian amphitheater, the silence was heavy, almost physical, pressing down upon the chitinous shoulders of the assembled counselors like the gravity of a neutron star. They were the masters of the Ethelgard hegemony, rulers of 1,000 star systems, conquerors of the void, and architects of a peace built upon the absolute annihilation of dissent. Yet in this moment the air tasted of ozone and terrified pheromones. The grand ocular, a massive holographic sphere that usually displayed the harmonious orbits of subservient worlds, now showed a single blinking red vector. It was not a fleet. It was not a cosmic storm. It was a single vessel. A solitary needle threading through the impenetrable fabric of the border zone, that region of dead space and gravimetric distortion that the hegemony had declared the edge of existence. For 10,000 cycles, nothing had crossed the border zone. The physics were considered impossible for sustained travel. The radiation density alone would flay the hull of a dreadnought in microcycles. And yet, the vector moved. It moved with a terrifying linear precision, ignoring the gravity wells of rogue stars, slicing through nebular density as if the universe itself was parting to allow its passage. High Exarch Thalcora, his carapace adorned with the platinum inlays of his station, gripped the edges of the command podium until the stone cracked beneath his claws. He stared at the readout, his compound eyes twitching in a physiological rejection of the data. "Report," Thalcora whispered, his voice a grinding of tectonic plates, amplified by the acoustics of the chamber to a deafening boom. "Tell me the sensors are malfunctioning. Tell me this is a ghost echo from a pulsar flare. Tell me anything other than what my eyes are seeing." The chief sensorian, a slender, gray-skinned Ethelgardian named Xylos, trembled as he manipulated the floating glyphs of his console. He was a creature of logic and mathematics, born and bred to interpret the whispers of the void, but the equations before him made no sense. They defied the foundational laws of propulsion that the hegemony had taught for millennia. "High Exarch," Xylos stammered, his mandibles clicking in involuntary spasms of distress. "We have recalibrated the long-range arrays 3 times. We have routed the data through the core AI of the throne world. The signal is verified. It is a physical object of immense mass. It is traveling at 0.99 of light speed, yet it registers 0 time dilation. It is ignoring the mass shadow of the black hole cluster in Sector 7. It is heading directly for the prime meridian." A ripple of murmurs, sounding like the rustling of dry leaves in a gale, swept through the thousands of assembled nobles and generals. The prime meridian was the imaginary line that demarcated the sacred inner space of the hegemony from the wild outer rim. To cross it without authorization was an act of war. To cross it with a ship that defied physics was an act of godhood. General Vrax, the supreme commander of the hegemony's armada, stepped forward, his heavy battle plate clanking against the obsidian floor. He was a warrior of the old breed, scarred and cynical, believing only in the supremacy of kinetic bombardment and plasma fire. "It is a weapon," Vrax declared, his voice cutting through the panic. "A kinetic kill vehicle launched by a rogue civilization from the deep dark. It has no escort because it needs none. It is a bullet fired at the heart of the Empire. We must intercept it, scramble the Void Stalkers, deploy the Titan-class disruptors. We will vaporize it before it crosses the meridian." Thalcora looked at his general, seeing the desperate need for control in the soldier's eyes. It was a comforting thought that this was merely a weapon, something that could be shot, burned, or broken. But the sensor data told a different story. The object was not merely a projectile, it was maneuvering. It was making micro-adjustments to its trajectory to avoid colliding with inhabited trade routes. It was careful. A bullet does not care what it hits, this vessel did. "Hold your fire, General," Thalcora commanded, though the order tasted like ash in his mouth. "If it is a weapon of such advanced design, our disruptors might be akin to throwing pebbles at a storm. We do not know what it is, and until we do, we will not provoke a power that can treat the border zone like a calm sea." The hours that followed were a torment of escalating tension. The vessel crossed the meridian. The alarms of the hegemony screamed across 100 worlds, a synchronized wail of fear that united billions of souls in a singular moment of dread. The hegemony's fleet, a shimmering ocean of silver hulls and de-weapon ports, formed a defensive sphere around the throne world of Ethelgard Prime. There were leviathans of war, ships so large they had their own gravity carrier vessels teeming with thousands of strike craft, and orbital defense platforms capable of cracking moons. Against this backdrop of martial might, The intruder finally dropped out of its impossible superluminal cruise. It did not decelerate, it simply stopped. One moment it was a blur of relativistic distortions, and the next it was there, hanging in the void, stark and still against the starfield. The visual feeds magnified the image, projecting it into the center of the High Synod. The council fell silent, their breath caught in their throats. They had expected a jagged, aggressive warship, bristling with gun batteries and armor plates. They had expected a sleek, predatory dart. What they saw was a monolith. It was a block of matte gray material, shaped like a vast, rectangular slab devoid of engines, devoid of windows, devoid of visible weaponry. It absorbed the light of the local star, reflecting nothing, a void within the void. It was colossal, larger than the High Exarch's palace, larger than the greatest dreadnought in the fleet. Etched into the side in a script that was simple, geometric, and utterly alien were symbols that the universal translators struggled to parse. Finally, the linguistics AI spat out a rough approximation based on archaic galactic root languages. The Voyager's Requiem. "It is a tomb," Ambassador Lyra whispered, her voice trembling. She was the youngest member of the council, a scholar of xenology who had argued for centuries that the hegemony was not alone, that the universe was too vast to be empty. Now, faced with the proof, she felt a cold terror gripping her heart. "No," General Vrax growled. "It is a troop transport or a carrier. Look at the hull. There are no seams, no exhaust ports. How does it move? How does it vent heat?" "Thermodynamics demands it vent heat, yet it is cold as the void." The ship hung there, motionless, ignoring the millions of weapons locked onto its hull. It emitted no scanning beams, no communication hails, no electronic warfare jamming. It simply existed, a quiet, terrifying assertion of presence. Then a single pulse of energy emanated from the vessel. It was not a weapon, it was a broadcast. It washed over the fleet, bypassing their encryption, bypassing their firewalls, and playing directly onto the bridge screens of every ship in the main ocular of the Synod. The screen flickered, resolving into an image. It was a bipedal creature, soft-skinned, unarmored. It possessed binocular vision, a small mouth, and tufts of fur on the top of its head. It wore a uniform of dark blue fabric, unadorned by medals or symbols of rank, save for a small, golden pin on the collar. The creature sat in a simple chair, a cup of steaming liquid in its hand. Behind it there was no bridge of war, no banks of frantic technicians. There was only a wall of books, physical paper books, ancient and fragile. The creature looked up, its eyes dark and calm, seemingly boring into the soul of every Ethel Guardian watching. When it spoke, the universal translator did not struggle. The voice was clear, resonant, and terrifyingly polite. "Greetings," the human said. "I am Captain Elias Thorne of the Terran Coalition vessel Voyager's Requiem. I apologize for the intrusion into your sovereign space. Our navigational charts for this sector are somewhat out of date." We did not realize the Ethelgard hegemony had expanded this far toward the galactic rim. The silence in the Synod was shattered by the sheer absurdity of the statement. Out of date? Expanded this far? The hegemony had ruled these stars for 10,000 years. To imply they were a recent development was an insult so profound it stunned the High Exarch into silence. "We are not here to conquer," Captain Thorne continued, taking a sip of his drink. "Nor are we here to trade at this moment. We are merely passing through. However, our sensors indicate a significant buildup of kinetic potential directed at our hull. We would prefer not to engage in hostilities. It is inefficient. We request passage through your territory to the galactic core. We are on a schedule." General Vrax slammed his fist onto the podium. "Arrogance, unchecked arrogance. They insult our history, ignore our borders, and now demand passage like we are a toll booth on a trade route. High Exarch, give the order. We will burn this Voyager's Requiem from the sky." Thalcora hesitated. The creature, this human, was too calm. There was no fear in its eyes. A species that faces the entire might of the hegemony without flinching is either incredibly stupid or possesses power that makes the hegemony's might irrelevant. "Open a channel," Thalcora commanded. "I will speak to this Captain Thorne myself." The link was established. The High Exarch stood tall, his image projected to the human ship, arfing the small figure of the captain. "I am High Exarch Thalcora, ruler of the Ethelgard hegemony, lord of the Thousand Suns. You have violated our most sacred laws. You have crossed the border zone, which is forbidden. You stand before the mightiest armada in the galaxy. Explain why I should not order your destruction this instant." On the screen, Captain Thorne set his cup down. He leaned forward slightly, his expression shifting from polite disinterest to a mild, weary curiosity. "High Exarch," Thorne said, "the border zone is not forbidden because of law. It is forbidden because of the radiation storms and the gravitational shear of the abyssal drift. You tell your people it is law to keep them safe. We appreciate that. It shows a duty of care. But for us, the drift is merely a current, as for your armada. Thorn paused, looking off-screen for a moment as if checking a minor notification. You have 42,312 vessels combat-ready. Your primary capital ships are charged with plasma lances. Impressive engineering. Truly. But High Exarch, if you fire, you will not destroy us. You will, however, destabilize the magnetosphere of the planet below you. Your fleet is positioned too close to the upper atmosphere. The feedback loop from a weapon discharge of that magnitude against our shields would strip the ozone layer from your world in seconds. We are not threatening you. We are warning you. Please stand down for your own safety. The Synod erupted. Lies, deception, a bluff. Vrax was apoplectic. He mocks us. He claims his shields are so strong that our own fire will kill us. It is a psychological trick. But tactician Calith, the quiet voice of reason in the Exarch's ear, was looking at the energy readings. Exarch, Calith whispered, his voice trembling. The energy output of their passive shields, it's not fluctuating. It's a flat line. But the scale is logarithmic. The reading is accurate. Their shield density is equivalent to the crust of a neutron star. If we fire plasma at that, the splashback really would be catastrophic. Thalcora felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. He looked at the human, who was now reading a book, waiting for an answer. Captain Thorn, Thalcora said, his voice tighter. You claim you're passing through? To where? The galactic core is a maelstrom of black holes. It is uninhabitable. It is the graveyard of stars. Thorn closed his book. It is where we live, he said simply. Or rather, where we keep our libraries. We are returning from an expedition to the outer rim. We were cataloging the expansion of the universe. It seems to be accelerating, troubling data. We need to verify it with the core archives. Look, High Exarch, we do not wish to delay. If you do not grant passage, we will have to go around. It will add 3 standard years to our journey. We would find that annoying. But if you force our hand, we will leave. We do not fight children. The insult hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Children. The Ethelgard who had conquered galaxies, who had enslaved species, who had built wonders, were children to this soft, unarmored creature. We are not children, Vrax roared, bypassing the Exarch's authority. All ships, fire, full spread, target the intruder. Belay that order, Thalcora screamed, but it was too late. The discipline of the fleet was absolute, but the loyalty to the general ran deep. The flagship of the First Fleet, the Sovereign's Wrath, opened fire. A lance of coherent plasma, hotter than the surface of a star, erupted from its prow, streaking across the void toward the gray slab of the Voyager's Requiem. The Council watched, breath held, expecting the explosion, the debris, the end of the arrogant alien. The beam struck the human ship. And then it vanished. There was no explosion, no flare of shields. The beam simply ceased to exist the moment it touched the hull. The energy was absorbed, swallowed whole. The Voyager's Requiem did not rock. It did not move. It did not change color. On the screen, Captain Thorn sighed. He looked disappointed. I told you, he said softly. Inefficient. Then the alarms on the Sovereign's Wrath began to scream. The ship's power core was draining rapidly. The energy they had fired and the energy in their reserves was being siphoned away. The lights on the massive dreadnought flickered and died. The gravity plating failed. The ship was dead in space, a drifting hulk, powered down not by weapon fire, but by the complete negation of its energy. We have absorbed the kinetic and thermal potential of your attack, Thorn explained, his voice sounding like a teacher scolding a student who threw a toy. We will store it for later use. Please do not do that again. Next time I will simply reflect it, and I do not want the blood of your crew on my conscience. The silence that followed was absolute. The power of the hegemony had been rendered null in a fraction of a second. They had fired their greatest weapon, and the human ship had simply eaten it. Thalcora sank into his throne. He realized then that the dread he had felt was justified. This was not a war. This was not a diplomatic incident. This was a contact event with a Type III civilization. The hegemony was a Type II harnessing the power of their stars. These humans, they harnessed the power of physics itself. Stand down, Thalcora whispered. All ships. Power down weapons. Do not target them. Do not scan them. Do not look at them wrong. He looked back at the screen. Captain Thorn, you have permission to pass. We will escort you to ensure no further misunderstandings. That is acceptable, Thorn said, nodding. Though the escort is unnecessary, we know the way. The link cut. The Voyager's Requiem began to move again, sliding through the blockade like a shark swimming through a school of minnows. The Ethelgard ships parted, drifting away in a mix of terror and awe. As the human vessel moved toward the inner systems, the reality of the situation began to settle upon the Synod. The world they knew, the hierarchy of power they had established, was a lie. They were not the apex predators. They were the krill, swimming in an ocean occupied by leviathans they had never noticed. The journey to the core took weeks. During that time, the Voyager's Requiem became a ghost story told across the Empire. It moved with a silence that was unnerving. It did not hail planets. It did not respond to trade requests. It simply moved. However, the High Exarch had insisted on an escort, a diplomatic vessel, the Gilded Wing, carrying Ambassador Lyra and a team of scientists, including the terrified Xylos. They trailed the human ship, keeping a respectful distance, recording everything. What they found baffled them. The wake of the human ship was healing. The subtle gravimetric distortions left by the hegemony's warp drives, the micro-tears in reality caused by millennia of careless propulsion, were being smoothed out behind the Voyager's Requiem. It was as if the ship was an iron, pressing the wrinkles out of the fabric of space-time. They aren't just traveling, Lyra noted in her log, her voice hushed in the dim light of her quarters. They are fixing the road as they walk. Who does that? Who has the power to repair the vacuum of space as a byproduct of their movement? She spent hours staring at the gray monolith, trying to understand the mind behind it. Eventually, she worked up the courage to send a personal hail, not a demand, but a question. "Captain Thorne," she said into the comms, "I am Ambassador Lyra. I am curious. Your vessel, it is not a warship. You said it is a library vessel, but it is stronger than our dreadnoughts. Why?" To her surprise, the comms chirped active immediately. Thorne's face appeared. He looked tired, rubbing his eyes. "Ambassador, a warship is designed to break things. A library is designed to preserve them, which requires more armor. If you carry the history of a species, the blueprints of civilization, the poetry of 1,000 dead worlds, you do not put it in a fragile box. You put it in a vault that can survive the death of the universe." Lyra paused, absorbing the philosophy. "You speak of the death of the universe as if it is something you expect." "We have seen it," Thorne said, his voice dropping an octave. "Or at least the echoes of it. That is why we are in the core. The hegemony, you live in the quiet zones, the safe eddies of the galaxy. You play at war because you have the luxury of resources. We humanity, we live in the storm. The galactic core is not just black holes, Ambassador. It is where the fabric of reality wears thin. Things come through. We keep them back." The revelation struck Lyra like a physical blow. "Things? What things?" Thorne hesitated. "You would call them demons, or gods, beings of pure entropy. We call them the others. They live in the spaces between universes. They try to enter ours to feed on the order, on the structure of matter. Our ships are warships, as you might imagine them. They never leave the core. They are the wall. The Voyager's Requiem is a courier. I am bringing updated star charts to the line so our artillery can aim better." Lyra sat back, her mind reeling. The hegemony believed the core was uninhabitable because of radiation. The truth was, the humans had made it uninhabitable to keep everyone else away, while they fought a secret war to protect the very existence of reality. The arrogance of the Ethelgard crumbled in her mind. They were children playing with sticks in the sandbox, while the adults held back a pack of wolves at the fence. Can I see?" Lyra asked. It was a request that could end her career, her life. "Can I see the core, the truth?" Thorne studied her. "It is not a sight for the faint of heart, Ambassador. It changes you. Once you know the scale of the threat, the petty politic. Of empires lose their flavor. You will never be able to look at your High Exarch and see a king again. You will only see a frightened child hiding under a blanket." "I want to see," she insisted. "Very well, dock your vessel with ours. We are approaching the transition point." The docking was seamless. Lyra, Xylos, and a small honor guard boarded the human ship. The interior was not cold and metallic like the Ethelgard ships. It was warm. It smelled of paper, of wood, of coffee. The corridors were lined with art, paintings of landscapes from a planet called Earth, sculptures of marble and bronze. It was a museum. They walked through the halls, guided by floating drones, until they reached the bridge. It was indeed a library. The walls were shelves of books. The crew, humans of various shapes and colors, sat at wooden desks, working with holographic displays that hovered over ancient manuscripts. It was a fusion of the archaic and the god-tier advanced. Thorne stood at the center, looking at a massive viewport that showed the swirling madness of the galactic core approaching. "We are entering the ergosphere of the central black hole," Thorne announced. "Shields to maximum density, reality stabilizers engaged." The view outside shifted. The stars elongated, turning into streaks of rainbow fire. The darkness of the void was replaced by a churning, violet fog. Lightning, spanning light years, crackled through the clouds, and there in the center of the storm was the megastructure. It was a ring built around the supermassive black hole at the center of the galaxy. It was made of the same matte gray material as the ship, but on a scale that defied comprehension. It was a Dyson ring, but not for energy collection. It was a fortification. "Behold," Thorn said softly, "the Aegis line." Along the ring, thousands of ships were docked, ships that made the Voyager's Requiem look like a toy. They were jagged, scarred, bristling with weaponry that hummed with energies unknown to the hegemony. They were firing, not at each other. They were firing into the black hole. "Why?" Xylos whispered, his mind fracturing under the data load. "Why are they shooting the black hole?" "They aren't shooting the hole," Thorn said. "They are shooting what is trying to crawl out of it." On the magnification screens, Lyra saw it. Tendrils of shadow, darker than the event horizon, were reaching out, clawing at the edges of the reality tier. The human ships were bombarding these tendrils with beams of pure white light, forcing them back, cauterizing the wound in spacetime. It was a surgery, a constant, eternal surgery to keep the universe from bleeding out. "We have been doing this for 5,000 years, Thorn said. "Ever since we discovered the breach. We abandoned our homeworlds, our comfort, to hold the line. We don't have an empire ambassador. We have a duty. The hegemony, the Federation, the republics, you all exist because we are here in the dark making sure the lights don't go out." Sudden alarms blared throughout the bridge. The lights turned red. "Captain," a crew member shouted, "breach in Sector 4, the containment field is fluctuating. A Tier 4 entity is pushing through." Thorn's demeanor changed instantly. The polite librarian vanished, the commander emerged. "Battle stations. Disengage docking clamps on the Gilded Wing. Ambassador, you need to leave, now." "No," Lyra shouted. "We can help, our ship has." "Your ship has plasma lances that would tickle that thing," Thorn barked. "Go. If that entity breaks the line, it will consume this sector in an hour and your empire in a week. We have to seal it." "How?" Lyra cried as the security drones ushered them back to the airlock. "The Voyager's Requiem," Thorn said, his eyes sad but determined. "It's not just a transport, it's a plug. It's loaded with enough antimatter to crack a planet. We're going to ram it down the throat of the breach and detonate." "You'll die." "We are the Requiem ambassador, it's in the name." Thorn offered a small, grim smile. "Tell your exarch, tell him to be kind. Life is too fragile to spend it oppressing others." The airlock cycled. Lyra and her team were shoved back onto the Gilded Wing. As they decoupled, they watched the Voyager's Requiem ignite its engines. Not the smooth, silent drive they had seen before. This was a raw, violent burn. The gray slab accelerated, turning into a spear of light. It dove straight into the swirling chaos of the black hole, straight toward the tendril of shadow that was thrashing against the combined fire of the human fleet. The collision was silent in the vacuum, but the shockwave shook the Gilded Wing like a leaf in a hurricane. A blinding flash of white light erupted from the center of the galaxy, outshining the billions of stars for a brief, terrible second. The shadow screamed, a psychic sound that echoed in the minds of every living being in the system, and then dissolved. The breach sealed. The light faded. The Voyager's Requiem was gone. The Gilded Wing drifted in the silence of the aftermath. The massive human warships on the ring ceased fire. One of them, a vessel the size of a moon, hailed the Ethelgard ship. The face on the screen was older, harder than Thorn S. An admiral. "Ambassador Lyra," the admiral said. Her voice was like grinding steel. "Captain Thorn transmitted his logs to us before the impact. He spoke highly of your curiosity." Lyra was weeping, her 4 eyes flowing with tears of grief and shock. He saved us. He saved everyone, and we wanted to destroy him." "That is the nature of the unknown," the admiral said. "We do not blame you, but now you know what lies in the dark. You know the cost of your safety." "We will tell them," Lyra vowed. "I will make the High Exarch understand. We will send fleets. We will send resources. We will help you hold the line." The admiral shook her head slowly. "No, Ambassador, your ships are not built for this gravity. Your shields cannot withstand the entropy. Send us your poets. Send us your music. Send us your philosophy. We have forgotten much of beauty in this war. If we are to fight for the universe, remind us why it is worth saving. That is the alliance we ask for." The Gilded Wing returned to Ethelgard Prime. The journey back was somber. When Lyra stood before the High Synod again, the atmosphere was different. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a fearful confusion. The data from the core had been broadcast. The video of the Voyager's Requiem sacrificing itself to stop a cosmic horror had played on every screen. High Exarch Thalcora sat on his throne, looking small and old. "Is it true?" he asked, his voice a whisper. Are we merely the sheltered children? Lyra stepped forward. She did not bow. She stood tall, carrying a physical book that Thorn had given her before the end. It was a copy of Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. "We are," she said, "but children grow up. We have spent 10,000 years conquering each other, fighting over scraps of territory, thinking we were the masters of the universe. All the while, the humans have been the shield, burning themselves to keep the darkness out." She opened the book. "They do not ask for our warships, Exarch. They ask for our culture. They ask for a reason to keep fighting. The Voyager's Requiem crossed our border not to invade, but to remind us that we are part of something larger. The Empire trembles in dread. No, the Empire should tremble in gratitude." Thalcora looked at the holograms of the human fleet holding the line at the core. He looked at his own generals, their armor polished and useless against the true threat. He slowly removed his crown, placing it on the podium. "Let the borders be opened," Thalcora commanded. "Let the trade routes flow to the core, not with weapons, but with art, with food, with hope. If they are the shield, we must be the heart worth protecting." The Ethelgard hegemony changed that day. The fear of the unknown was replaced by a solemn purpose. They were no longer the conquerors. They were the supply line. They were the choir singing behind the soldiers. And far away in the swirling violet dark of the galactic core, the human fleets fought on, no longer alone in spirit. But the story did not end there. Years later, a signal came from the void beyond the galaxy, from the dark space where the Voyager's Requiem had detonated. It was not a threat. It was not a monster. It was a message, encoded in the resonance of the explosion. The scientists of the hegemony and the human admirals analyzed it together. It was a map. The detonation had not just sealed the breach. It had illuminated the path through the dimensional tier. The others were not invading. They were fleeing something even bigger. And the humans, in their sacrifice, had inadvertently kicked open the door to a higher plane of existence. The Admiral looked at Lyra, who was now an elder stateswoman of the Alliance. "It seems," the human said, a spark of the old explorer's light in her eyes, "that the war is not just about holding the line. It's about moving forward. Thorn didn't just close a door, Lyra. He opened a window." Lyra looked at the star map, showing galaxies uncounted, realities layered like pages in a book. "Then we shall explore it," she said, "together." The lone human warship had crossed the border, and the Empire had trembled. But out of that dread, a new future had been forged, one where the terrifying silence of the void was filled not with fear, but with the shared defiance of two species standing against the dark. And in the silence of the core, the ghost of the Voyager's Requiem drifted, its mission complete, its legacy eternal. The dread was gone. Only the stars remained. The vastness of the universe was no longer a source of terror, but a promise. The Ethelgard looked up, and for the first time they did not see territory to conquer. They saw a frontier to protect. And beside them the humans smiled, checked their ammunition, and poured another cup of coffee. The long night was far from over, but at least now they had company. The great hall of the Ethelgard was quiet now, years after the revelation. Lyra walked the halls, her footsteps echoing on the obsidian. She stopped at a new monument erected in the center of the plaza. It was not a statue of a warrior or an exarch. It was a simple rectangular slab of gray stone, unadorned, silent. Etched into the surface were words in the human tongue, and beneath them, the Ethelgard translation. "In memory of the Voyager's Requiem. They came in peace, they left in fire, they held the door." Lyra touched the stone, feeling the cold surface. She remembered Thorn's face, the calmness, the utter lack of posturing. She realized that was the true strength of humanity. They didn't need to look powerful, they just were. She looked up at the sky, where the fleets of the Alliance were gathering for the expedition into the breach. The twist of fate was cruel yet beautiful. The enemy they feared, the others, were refugees from a universe collapsing under its own weight. The humans had been fighting a desperate vanguard, not an invasion force. And now, with the map provided by Thorn's sacrifice, the Alliance was going to go through the breach. Not to fight, but to rescue. It was the ultimate human paradox. They would build a wall of guns to stop you, and then, once they understood you were hurting, they would tear down the wall to carry you to safety. Lyra smiled, her mandibles clicking softly. The Empire had trembled in dread, yes, but now it stood in awe, and that was a far stronger foundation for a future. The lone ship had done its job. It had turned an empire of fear into a federation of hope. As the first ships engaged their drives to cross into the new dimension, Lyra whispered into the wind. "Godspeed, Captain Thorn, we are coming." The stars shimmered, and the fleet vanished into the unknown, leaving the galaxy safe, for now in the wake of the giants who walked softly and carried the weight of the world. The silence returned to the grand ocular, but it was a peaceful silence. The red blinking light was gone. The watch continued, but the dread had been replaced by the enduring light of unity. And somewhere in the data streams of the universal consciousness, the file labeled Humanity was updated. Status dangerous, unpredictable Guardian class. Note, do not provoke, do not underestimate, and if you are in trouble, call them.